Hello, welcome to the third video of this AS level series of economics videos. And video 3 is about types of economic systems, because it is possible that the resources, the limited resources in the economy, are not allocated by the market mechanism. Most of the AS level economics course is about looking at how the market mechanism, demand and supply, decides how we use the limited resources that we have to solve the basic economic problem, and also how government sometimes intervenes to override the market mechanism. But we should remember that it's possible for national economies to be set up in different ways and having different methods for allocating those limited resources. Now, most countries in the world have what's called a mixed economy. That means that there are some resources allocated by market mechanism and other resources allocated by the state through planning. But it is possible to have extremes, and that's what I want to look at here. So as we look at types of economic systems, the first type of economic system we're going to look at is the free market system. The free market system, a completely free market system, would be where every single resource available would be allocated by the market mechanism to private businesses owned by private individuals. And this system, which doesn't actually exist in the world, there's no country which does not have a state system of allocation of resources as well as private ownership. But were it to be true that a country had merely private ownership, this would throw up certain advantages but certain disadvantages as well, and they're listed here. So there are nice features and nasty features of such a system. The nice features: profit incentive, so there would be dynamic efficiency. But if everything is owned privately, then everything is driven by the profit incentive, and it would be in the interests of firms to come up with new products and develop and research for new products which people would want to buy from them and not their competitors. And in this way we get dynamic efficiency. Dynamic efficiency, which is when the economy is set up in such a way that we get the most progress over time. So dynamic efficiency would exist under a free market system, and we'd likely see lots of innovation and progress. Secondly, some people say that in such a system there would be high quality goods and lower prices because private firms are competing with each other to win custom. So they have an incentive to drive the price as low as possible and make the quality of the good as high as possible in order to win custom and be successful in competition. And consumers would have more choice, as they have a range of similar products from different companies and different businesses to buy from. And finally, there would be low tax, because after all, if the state is not having to provide services, then it doesn't need to collect tax because it doesn't have to pay out to public sector workers and the provision of public sector services. So consumers who are workers and businesses would also enjoy lower tax, and that leaves more disposable income for consumers as workers as well to go out and spend, so it could raise living standards, and it leaves businesses with more money to spend on investment and research. However, there would be intolerable levels of inequality because there'd be no provision for or social safety net for those who are most vulnerable in society, those with the lowest skills or the no skilled. And the inequality would be even greater during the business cycle. During downturns we would see more unemployment, and during the upturns we'd see in booms there'd be greater booms, and so the distance between the output gaps of the boom and the downturn, the trough in the business cycle, would be more extreme, and there would be greater suffering therefore for those caught at the wrong part of that business cycle. Essential services, specifically education and healthcare, would be unavailable to the poor because it would be a good that has to be paid for, and there would be those who could not afford to pay for private education and private healthcare, and there would be those who would choose not to pay for private education. So as we have it in Britain and in all Western countries, the law says children must go to school and it's provided free. And that's the intervention of the state, who recognise that were it to be left to the free market system, it would be unacceptable because only those who could afford it would be able to access those essential services for a civilization. And finally, monopolies would exploit the public. It's very possible that giant private companies would come to dominate industries, creating barriers to entry where other firms could not challenge them and compete with them, and in the end consumers wouldn't get choice and would be forced to buy from monopolies, perhaps low quality goods at high prices. So there are features of this free market system which are so undesirable that governments of any political persuasion have said, no, we can't accept that, there must be some state involvement. But how far should the state involvement go? Of course, the ultimate is communist states where the ruling Communist Party have had complete and utter control over the allocation of all resources. Nothing is decided by the market mechanism. Everything is planned as the party commands what will be produced and how resources, limited resources, should be used. And that is called a command economy. Now let's look at some of the features of a command or planned economy. So, a command or planned economy would have certain desirable features. There would be low or no unemployment because the government would allocate each unit of labour, each worker, into a specific job. There would be less waste of resources, presumably, and no waste on marketing because there'd be no need for private firms to use marketing to try and convince consumers to buy their goods. The government would be providing the goods. So there might be a better use of resources in that sense. However, there would be no incentive to work hard, and the quality of work would certainly suffer because under the price mechanism, if a company is not producing a good which people want or is not producing it at a competitive level, they will go out of business. That's not going to happen. And workers will know that, and so the quality of work will very likely fall. There'll be no choice for consumers. They have to buy the product that is allocated to them by the government supplier. And there might be no progress as well. And that reminds me of a very nice story which Alan Greenspan, the ex-Federal Reserve chairman, told. He was on a trip while working for the Federal Reserve Bank of America. He was on a trip to the USSR, as it was then, the Soviet Republic. And as he was being driven from the airport to the city, he was past some agricultural fields and he saw some tractors working in a field, and these tractors struck him as extremely old, and he asked about the tractors, and the reply he got was that, well, these are the tractors that the Soviet Union has been making for many, many years, and they're perfectly okay, and the government tractor factory that makes these works very well and has produced these tractors for a long, long time. But of course what Greenspan realized was that in the US, where he had come from, competing tractor companies had fought against each other to come up with better and better tractors to be the tractor that farmers wanted to buy, and in that way the quality of tractors in the US had progressed. This is dynamic efficiency. There was nothing wrong with the original tractors, but the quality of tractors and the innovation in tractor manufacturing had progressed, leaving behind what the Soviets were still making. Their concept was, let's improve the quality of tractors so people buy our tractors. That was the attitude of private tractor companies in the US, whereas the attitude in the Soviet Union was, well, we've allocated resources into a tractor factory, they make tractors that work, that's fine, we can leave that. There was no pressure to improve the quality of the tractors. And this is what struck Greenspan as he was in his first few minutes in the Soviet Union. And I think that is a major problem with the command economy. There is no progress if there doesn't need to be progress. And finally, perhaps what the state decides should be made is not what people want. What gets produced is not what people want. It's the government deciding what will be produced and in what quantities, but inevitably there are both shortages, as the government does not allocate enough resources into a particular product, and there are gluts, or there's overproduction of some goods as well, as the government over-allocates resources. How can the government planning committee know precisely what quantities of every single good to produce? Inevitably, they get those quantities wrong. Now, the command or planned economy does not exist anymore. There were around 30 countries who attempted to run command or planned economies, but when communism collapsed in the late 1980s, early 1990s, it was illustrated that this was not a system that worked. Of course, North Korea is still a communist country and still attempts to do this. It would be wrong, though, to say China is like this, because there is private ownership of businesses in China. So although China is still ruled by the Chinese Communist Party, they have allowed it to become a mixed economy, like nearly all of the economies in the world. So a mixed economy is where private and state ownership of resources coexists, where the market mechanism allocates some resources, and yet planned decisions by government determine output and price in other industries. So it's a combination of the market mechanism at work in some markets and the state overriding that market mechanism in other markets, typically education, healthcare, defense. But what is the right balance? Because China and the USA are both examples of mixed economies. So not all mixed economies are, to the same extent, the balance between private and state control. Of course, there's huge differences, and therein lies the debate that is at the heart of many economists and politicians. No one really argues strongly for any other system but a mixed economy. But where should the balance be between private and state ownership and allocation of resources? That's the issue that is debated. Okay, so from here we move on and look at specifically the market mechanism and how in, first of all, individual markets, micro markets, how the allocation of resources takes place. And so in the next video, video 4, we look at the demand curve. So, I'll see you in that video.